Hello once again, everybody. Thank you for joining me here on this Thursday, September 24th edition of ATS.io Radio. I am your host, Adam Burke. I'll be joined today by professional bettor and handicapper Brad Powers from BradPowersSports.com. We'll talk about different games and some highlight topics for Week 4 of the college football season and do the same for Week 3 of the NFL season. Lots of content available to you over at ATS.io right now. We're covering the top sportsbook promotions from around the industry, and there are a lot of very, very good ones here for this weekend for you to check out. Talking about Michigan looking to go online here sometime before the end of 2020. Tennessee looking to do the same. We got stuff up about that over at ATS.io as well. To go along with a bevy of picks, previews, and predictions for all the different stuff that's going on, whether it's college football or the NFL. Bunch of daily MLB stuff, NBA, we're in the conference finals, NHL in the Stanley Cup finals, and we cover golf, UFC, all sorts of different things over at the website. So I encourage you to head on over there and check it out. Also check out our ATS YouTube page where we get some highlight clips from the ATS.io radio show and also get some stuff from Brian Blessing, who joins us every Tuesday here on the podcast. And make sure you subscribe to ATS Radio. You can do that on Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, wherever you download and listen to your podcast content. With that, we bring on Brad Powers, professional handicapper and bettor from BradPowersSports.com. And Brad, how's it going today, man?
Man, it's going well. How you doing?
I'm doing well, buddy. Appreciate your time as always here on this Thursday. And I guess CLV this year for you stands for COVID line value because you just keep having a bunch of great bets taken off the board with cancellations.
Yeah, absolutely. And, my favorite bet of the entire year so far was taken off this week. Just a mistake by Circa. And they posted a North Texas Houston total of 57. I mean, I had to, double take. Was that Houston's team total or the overall total for the whole game? So that one where I was going to have 2 touchdowns plus a CLV off the board. No bet.
Well, and it's frustrating. I mean, obviously, there are much bigger things at play, but still, a lot of these games here, they're trying to reschedule games and try to get these teams some games, and those wind up getting canceled too. I think we've had, 4 games wiped off the board here so far in Week 4. And in fact, now I also saw this morning that the Louisiana game could be in question as they've got some players dealing with some COVID situations. So Georgia Southern and Louisiana could be taken off the board here as well. You got a bet on that one or no?
No, I should have because Circa opened UL Lafayette 19. So a huge significant move there. But I was more concerned on the other side, Georgia Southern's COVID issues from a couple weeks ago. But now it looks like it's on the other side. So that's a missed opportunity. Let's just put it that way.
Well, we've talked about this a lot. We've touched on it with our different guests here, and we've kind of done this in a sort of progressive way, week by week by week, talking about getting in on the markets early. And it feels like, you're still trying to grab line value. And, it seems like we don't really have to worry about teams coming down with COVID and lines moving because when they get COVID, the game just gets canceled. Yeah. So maybe that gives us some confidence to bet a little more early on in the week.
Yeah, certainly. Regardless of whether or not the team specifically has a bunch of positive cases in the instance of South Florida, just more precautionary because their opponent from the previous week, Notre Dame, had a bunch of positive cases. Yeah, I think, look, it's going to work out in the end. Some are going to move against you. Some are going to move with you. My take is, it kind of is what it is. I'm just going to continue to fire away. It's not going to change too much as far as my philosophy goes.
Well, and that was something we talked about on Monday was, if you're not going to trust your own numbers, who's going to trust your numbers? You put in all that work, you might as well support it things early on in the week where you feel like you've got some line value. And I don't know how many of our listeners put together power ratings and then their own spreads, but also you just kind of get a feel for the market. And more often than not, you can make educated guesses as to which of these lines will move in the favor that you think or opposite what your thoughts are on that game. So I would encourage bettors to do that. And even if you do it, with some lower bet sizes than you would typically bet, work on that, practice that. This is, all years are a good opportunity to do it, but especially this year here where you do have a limited number of games. You've got some conferences in play that most people don't normally pay attention to. this is a good year to work on some things, I think, for our listeners out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming up with before you even look at a line to begin with, coming up with your own line on the game. And, if you have big disparities, feel free to put $5, $10, $20, depending on what your bankroll is. I mean, it certainly engages you a lot more in that specific game. And, yeah, I would say this would be a good year to learn a lot because, even though, I'm betting a lot of my numbers, I'm also getting an idea of how much players are worth because some players are obviously going to be out, some are not. How much is, 2-3 games of games under their belt versus a team opening up their season. How much is that worth? A lot of things that I'm learning, even though I've been in the industry a decade plus.
Well, and I think it's important too, especially because, a lot of our listeners, the vast majority of our listeners are in the U.S. And whether you're in a jurisdiction with legal sports betting or not, it's probably going to happen for you here at some point, unless you live in a state like Utah or Alaska or Hawaii, something like that. Most of the states that are out there will wind up with legal sports betting. I think, 23 or so already have it, maybe more than that at this point in time. But, this is a good time to work on those things and be prepared to hit those early week numbers. Circa opens the global market, then a lot of the offshores tend to follow. A lot of places do wind up copying where those numbers end up going. But with that being said, you can still get some line value early in the week. And if you're in one of those states, as this continues to grow, very much a practice you want to get into.
Absolutely. And again, my philosophy is, how can you bet so early in a week when you don't know who's playing or what the weather is or whatnot? To me, it still comes down to this. I would much rather bet an individual bookmaker or a book than I would waiting until game day, even though we have all the information available at that point. I would much rather bet against one guy, whether it's that sportsbook director or whoever's making the line there, than waiting until the actual game day and I'm betting against the entire market, whether it be the public, the sharp bettors, the syndicate bettors, positive EV bets the entire week are against that individual property or individual person.
Well, and I think that's an excellent point, and maybe something that's a little bit of an advanced point, for a lot of our listeners out there that you really aren't betting against the book unless you're betting very early in the week where they're still kind of trying to figure out, what their position is going to be on that game. As you said, you're betting against the market the longer that you wait. And I agree with you. That's an excellent take by you. And it's one of the differences, and we'll talk more about this as we go throughout the show and as we seasons. There's a difference between handicapping and betting. Handicapping is breaking down the game. It's looking at the stats and the matchups, all the things you would typically do, in a fantasy football context or in reading somebody's game preview, or maybe you're out there writing your own game previews, something like that. But betting is the idea of having that feel for the market, of playing those openers, expecting that line to go your way, of playing a game because the line suggests that you should, even though maybe the matchup or the handicap isn't as convincing. So that's such an important delineation in this industry between handicapping and betting and the differences between the two.
Absolutely. Two completely different things. I mean, betting is specifically numbers. You're not necessarily worried about a significant matchup edge or whatnot, or a position group. It should be all built in, at least originally. You're betting around key numbers, especially early in the week. That's especially what I'm looking for when I'm betting the circa numbers. But handicapping is, the entire process. Usually handicapping starts with the power rating differential, then goes into matchup, situation, weather, all that different things that go into an actual handicap. So, yeah, two completely different things. And that's why, there's just bettors out there. They couldn't tell you a single player on a team. And then there's handicappers that they can dive into specific matchups.
Well, and speaking of weather here, we're into late September, so make sure you're checking those weather reports.
Yep.
Wind, the biggest factor more than anything, but obviously precipitation can definitely impact a game as well. I want to talk about a topic here for one of our highlight videos on ATS Radio for the ATS YouTube page. I teased this last week, and I'm glad that I remembered to do it because a lot of times I don't remember anything these days. But we talked about last week how we would do a video on live betting and some of the things that we look for in that context. And I think both of us agree live betting is the future of this business. The full game market has gotten a lot more difficult to beat. So you try to find those opportunities in game. I know you had one last week where you looked at Tulane, thought Tulane was going to run away with that game against Navy, and you could see where your thought process was, but the game just kind of flipped, did a 180, didn't work out. On the other hand, you had a situation like that with Army, where you thought Army was going to run a team off the field, and they absolutely did earlier on in the week. So in this highlight video here, let's talk about live betting and talk about what you're kind of looking for as a game is going on to make some of those live wagers.
So obviously college football is a major swing in momentums, and I'm looking at a variety of things. You know, maybe if you're looking to make a second half bet, maybe a team, you know, scored right before the half that you can see is going to give them momentum going into the break. In particular, and it showed up before I get to the Tulane loss, that I didn't think was properly accounted for was the injury. We saw Spencer Sanders for Oklahoma State, the quarterback, come up gimpy for them. And I didn't see that. The couple books I was looking at that offered that game up, to me, didn't look like they were making the proper adjustments. It was clear that Sanders didn't look like he was going to come back into the game. And at least the original backup for Oklahoma State didn't look like he was very capable of, you know, moving the team in the scoring position consistently, especially with a team that at the time was laying, you know, a double-digit point spread, even though there was significant struggles there for Oklahoma State in that game. So with all the games going on, and it's going to be more pertinent this particular week with the SEC and a much bigger card than what we've seen in college football the first couple of weeks of the season, I don't think the sportsbook directors are certainly on top of injuries, key injuries, and obviously quarterback's the biggest one, but that we've seen it with you know, wide receivers, key running backs, again, not getting properly accounted for. And then finally for me, Adam, is, you know, you're looking for a specific game where you're expecting to see more of the same. BYU Navy on Labor Day night, you knew within the first couple possessions it wasn't going to be Navy's night. So I wasn't afraid, you know, to lay 14, 17, whatever it was with BYU in that particular night. I thought last weekend I was going to see more of the same. I watched the first couple, you know, series of the Tulane Navy game. You know, Tulane locked down Navy's option. Tulane moved the football against Navy. So what the hell? It was 7-0 in game. I bet Tulane minus 13.5. I'm like, I think it's going to be a blowout. And at halftime, when it was 24-0, after I made it, you know, the bet when it was 7-0, I felt pretty comfortable. Why? You know, Navy typically is not a team that's going to be able to come from behind from big deficits. They can't throw the football. So, you know, that one went down in flames, unfortunately. But, you know, if I had to do it over again, I would make exactly the same bet on Tulane.
Well, and that's the thing that you want to keep in mind with this business in general, and with live betting certainly too. You know, you want to focus on the process over the results. You know, more often than not, that bet is going to win. You know, Navy is not a come from behind team. They run a triple option. I mean, you know, they can't start chucking the ball vertical down the field because it's just not in their repertoire. But they made some adjustments, wind up coming back, win the game outright. It happens. It is what it is. But you thought you isolated something in game that, you know, maybe wasn't properly accounted for in the line. And you mentioned the Spencer Sanders thing. That's an excellent one. You think about injuries in football, you think about foul trouble in the NBA and college basketball. Those are things that aren't properly accounted for because a lot of times live betting is very algorithmic. It's how much time is left, what the score is, what the spread was before the game, stuff like that. And it won't take into account those things like injuries and foul trouble and just being able to watch the game. No matter how much work we do before a game actually starts, it is still educated guesswork. We're trying to get the best number that we can. We're trying to see if we can handicap as much variance as possible out of the game. And we're trying to see how this thing's going to play out in our minds. There is no substitute for seeing how things are actually playing out. And that's where live betting can generate a lot of advantages where you can say, hey, you know, this team's just not moving the football. There's something going on here. Or, hey, this pass rush, this other team's defensive line is completely dominating this game. And those are things that maybe you thought about before the game, maybe you accounted for before the game, but now you're actually seeing them. And that's when you can extract some equity betting on that game.
Yeah, and in particular, those matchups, the defensive line, offensive line, stuff that maybe was in your handicap on the game, but you thought, it's worth a point or so here. But when you actually physically see something like that, oh my goodness, this is worth several points. I didn't properly account for it. And yeah, sometimes you're not taking the best of the number like you were maybe pre-flop that ended up being correct on your behalf. But I'm okay taking, 3-4 points worse of it when I think it's maybe worth 7 points or something more than that. Again, it's the future of the industry. With each passing year, more books are offering it, more games are available. Again, no matter how good your pre-flop handicap is, sometimes it's just, nothing beats betting a game in game. And again, I'm going to point to it all year. The BYU Navy game was example A of, I don't care how good your pre-flop handicap is, physically seeing something on your screen like that, it just doesn't get any better than that.
Well, and one last point to mention here. We talked previously in our previous segment, and you can hear everything that we have to say on our ATS radio podcast. But we talked about this is a good year for people to try making their own numbers, to work on power ratings, to bet early in the week. Even if you don't bet the same bet amounts that you usually do as you get closer to kickoff, you can throw a quarter unit out there or a half unit out there, something like that, just to get yourself in the practice of doing that, of making your own numbers, playing early in the week, seeing how many games move in your favor. Let's say you're a $50 or $100 bettor, pre-flop, but you want to learn live betting. Make $5, $10, $15, $20 wagers on that just to, get your sea legs under you, get an understanding for how the process works, how the algorithms change the lines based on what's happening and all these types of things. You don't have to go crazy with it. You don't have to bury yourself with your bankroll and wind up having 50, 60% of your bankroll in play because you're live betting the game. Just give yourself the opportunity to learn how it all works, to see if you can isolate some of those scenarios, see if you can find some things that maybe the sports books don't account for. Like you said, the Spencer Sanders injury, like I've mentioned the example of foul trouble, and just, go about it that way and see if it's something you can get a little bit more of a feel for, because we all know that when a lot of people bet on games, they watch them too. And this gives you the opportunity to, either live trade the game or just at least get a feel for what both Brad and I believe is the future of sports betting.
Yeah, and I think your point should be very valid. You got to be very careful because the temptation is always there after you see a certain score or a certain play to fire on a team. It's okay to bet a little bit in game, but as you're learning and filling out the process, lower your amounts. I can't emphasize that enough because, especially in college football, college basketball, there are incredible NBA, incredible moves of swings of momentum and as far as game flow. Although one more thing that we haven't mentioned, you also in game the opportunities for middles, because especially with sports like college basketball, college football, and the NBA, with those massive swings in momentum and game flow, man, you can really set yourself up for 14, 17, 21 point middling opportunities. And that's another reason why I think in-game live betting is the wave of the future.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk about misleading box scores here on this show quite a bit. We do that a lot on Mondays as we sort of, recap the weekend. And you see line moves based on those misleading box scores. You see moves where a team outgained the other team by 200 yards. Their line comes out a little bit short in the minds of the market. All of a sudden, that line's going up on Monday. It's a similar thing with live betting. If a team shoots 7 for 11 from 3 in the first half, they're probably not going to do that again in the second half. So that is a live betting thing that you can look to take advantage of. A team may go 6 for 7 on down in the first half. Probably won't happen in the second half, but if you notice that they're just having success, tight ends are running free, third and medium, they're just guys are open by 3 yards, maybe it won't regress to the mean. Maybe that's an angle you can still play on. So live betting gives you a lot of these opportunities. Again, you have to be responsible with your bankroll and not have too much of it in play because a lot of different things can happen. But the overall theme here, the overall point is that there are a lot of opportunities to be had. And in some instances, it can be much easier than handicapping a game pre-flop, just because, again, you've been able to see something
Yeah.
play out, whether you expected it or not.
Absolutely. The issue is a guy like me that's all information based and, has a customer base as well. Getting that information out to those people in a timely manner is the kind of push and pull. But if you're an individual guy learning the market and wanting to do this, I think that would be my sole. If I was just starting in the industry right now, I wouldn't even worry about pre-flop. I would just focus solely on the in-game live betting.
Well, definitely the future of sports betting, as you and I have said multiple times here on this segment. And make sure you check out all of our highlight videos over on our ATS YouTube page. And also make sure you're subscribed here to listen to the full versions of ATS.io radio. All right, with that, before we get into a few game breakdowns here, we'll give ourselves a couple of minutes to sort of survey the card. Just in general here, as the SEC begins play, as the ACC keeps going, we've got situations again this week, Brad, where we've got some teams that have been playing, some teams that haven't been, some teams with 2 or 3 games, some teams with 1 game. Do you feel like the sports books are, really starting to account pretty well for those situations where we've got, differences of where the state of the team is? Or do you feel like there are still some opportunities to be had?
Early in the week, they're not, in my opinion, properly accounting for some of it. But I think once you and I start talking on Thursdays, I think the market is sharper now than what it was, say, 2 weeks ago, specifically, obviously, in college. But again, I pounded my fist here. Sunday and Mondays, I don't think that they've grasped COVID issues, your certain situations where, for example, Duke, Virginia, Duke's played 2 games, Virginia. If you were to just do that, like on a Friday or Saturday for the upcoming week, those certain situations and bet on or against those teams, I think you're going to get at least a couple points of close value in most instances. Because right now, if you're looking to bet on Sunday and Monday, again, the books have not properly accounted for a lot of these. And certainly this week, I saw more significant moves from the Circa World openers than even what I saw last week.
I don't know what your number is in that Duke-Virginia game. I got Virginia -4 in that one, and it opened, 9, I think?
9 at Circa. So, again, not being properly accounted for the fact Duke, not only, you talked about it earlier, a misleading, final against Boston College. That was one thing that, bettors were going to look to pounce on Duke. And then the other factor, Duke just got done playing 2 games. Virginia hasn't played yet. You knew a lot of the early betting money would come on Duke in that instance. So, again, wasn't properly accounted for then. Now, obviously, through a key number of 7, it's, at least better price on the line. I still think there'd be some slight value on Duke.
All right, so it sounds like you and I are both in the same spot there, Virginia -4 in that type of range. And again, that's why it's helpful and beneficial to create your own numbers and have those things to go off of early in the week. We got a quick turnaround here, obviously, but just real quickly here, we got a Thursday night game and we have a Friday night game, which was just recently added to the card because Middle Tennessee rescheduled a game against somebody. But UAB and South Alabama tonight, game 417, 418. Starting to see a few 7s pop up out there in the market with UAB, a road favorite against a South Alabama team that's been very impressive to this point.
Certainly, but you also, I think it's taken into consideration as far as the line. My line on the game is right near where the number is on this one. And keep in mind, UAB is a pretty good team. South Alabama was getting double digits against Southern Miss, who I think UAB is better than. And then clearly now that we've seen Southern Miss for a couple games. And then, Tulane was also at South Alabama, laying double digits in that one. And UAB Tulane might be a similarly power-rated team. So, again, factored in the line. What's also, interesting about tonight's game, and I think another in-game live betting opportunity, you got 2 teams playing, backup quarterbacks in this one. Tyler Johnson's hurt for UAB. His backup's gotten some snaps, gotten some playing time the first couple games, but we'll see. First road start for him. Does he struggle? Again, I'm not sure that's going to be properly accounted for pre-flop. And then also Lovertich, the JC transfer for South Alabama. Again, a player that's gotten a lot of snaps in the first couple games, but he has never started, at least at this level before. Again, maybe both quarterbacks handle it fine, but I'm guessing one's going to handle it better than the other, and you're going to be able to see that for the first couple series of the game. again, another in-game live betting opportunity, in my opinion.
The Friday night game is kind of a throwaway game on the surface because, these aren't teams that are very good or very popular, but it's a very interesting handicap here with Middle Tennessee State and UTSA game 455, 456. Look, when you get trucked by Army in week 1, I will give you a pass for that because you don't see the option if you're Middle Tennessee State. And quite frankly, you're more worried about your team and kind of getting everything set up with your squad. When you get trucked by Troy the following week, not a very good look. A Troy team that hadn't played a game yet. Middle Tennessee, did play a gimmicky kind of game against Army, but still it was just not a good look for them at all. UTSA, who's been one of the bottom 5 in everybody's power ratings the last, 3 or 4 years pretty much, laying a touchdown with a total of 60 in this game. Oof. I mean, I'm not going to be invested in this game. I doubt you will be either, but man, you talk about Texas State last week, you talk about UTSA this week, some teams that are not accustomed to big favorite roles laying some decent numbers early on here.
Yeah, I mean, if this game is preseason power rings, Middle Tennessee be favored. And I dropped Middle Tennessee about 8 points. Maybe it hasn't been enough. I'm just not built to, automatically drop a team 2 touchdowns in my power ratings after a couple of games. But, man, the market certainly looks like they've dropped Middle Tennessee down double digits. I like the job and like what I've seen from UTSA so far. But, man, a pure power rating for me is in the field goal range. Even though, in a typical season, I'd be giddy up. Let's go with Middle Tennessee. I'll take the +7. Looks like an overreaction. I'm just not willing to do that at this point. For me, maybe small potatoes type of bet. I'm going to go over. I think UTSA's offense is legit this year. Some missed scoring opportunities for them. And, I worry about Middle Tennessee's defense, but I also think their offense is due to have a good performance here. So higher total here, 59 and 60 range, but I would lean over.
Well, and this is one UTSA has very much increased their tempo this year, and maybe that's accounted for in the number. Maybe it's not. I guess we'll kind of wait and see how that one plays out. Game 395, 396, Florida State and Miami. I thought opening under 10 was a gift. I expected this number to move up, and it has. It's still not up to where my number has this game, but it is 11 or 11.5 out there. Total 53.5 to 54 range. So maybe that's kind of keeping this number down a little bit because the total has dropped about a full field goal or more in the marketplace. But, look, Florida State's in a tough spot here. I mean, their coach sidelined with COVID-19, Mike Norvell, who was already a first-year head coach anyway. They didn't play last week. Miami hung almost 50 on Louisville. Is this number too high for you to take a shot on Miami, or do you feel like the Hurricanes are in line to blow away another opponent here?
Wow, the way you're breaking it down, it sounds like sure thing Miami. It's near my number. Maybe I've been too slow to adjust Miami's power rating, even though I got them up 4 or 5 points. I think they're clearly a top 15 team.
I guess let me ask you this, because I know you like to regrade games as the season goes along. Florida State didn't play last week, and I still dropped them 3 points because Georgia Tech looked very good against them and then got blown out by Central Florida.
Well,
so
I thought Georgia Tech
is that fair?
I thought Georgia Tech looked okay against Central Florida. A lot of missed scoring opportunities again for the Yellow Jackets. I think, obviously, Central Florida put it on them in the fourth quarter because it was a 28-21 game entering the fourth quarter in that one. And again, that was already taken into consideration. Georgia Tech had messed up many scoring opportunities. UCF did as well. But, no, I guess that's where our disagreement is. I did drop Florida State because Norvell's not there. I think he's worth at least a point and just not the man hours and him not physically being there for this game out with COVID-19. But, yeah, I didn't drop him 3 points. So let's just put it that way.
All right, because that's the difference. My line's 15, so if I leave those 3 points there, I'm at 12. So I'm pretty much in line with the market for the most part. So yeah, and that's something that I've been doing power ratings for several years. I know you've been doing power ratings dating long before that, back to your Phil Steele days with North Coast Sports, and maybe that's part of the problem is that sometimes I still run into a little bit of that overreaction, a little bit of that recency bias. And generally speaking, when our numbers are different, mine and yours, it's because I've overreacted to something. So
Oh,
I guess
I
it's
don't
not a
know.
big
I mean,
surprise here.
we made a lot of dinner bets on those last year, and last I checked, you came out of those
I can still
tolerating
taste that burger.
disagreements.
Man, that burger was good.
It was. I owe you a few more.
Hey, if I keep picking good spots like that, I don't think you'll mind.
Oh, yeah, not at all, man. Are you kidding me?
All right, one other game I want to talk about here, and then we'll get to a highlight game. But I wanted to get your take on Tennessee and South Carolina. For those watching the highlight videos, I am wearing a hat that says Cox on it. Not because never mind. I just like South Carolina. But interesting game here. That 3.5 is now the side. 43.5 is the total. So if you listen to Monday's show and you bet the under, you got some totals value on that one. Both Kyle Hunter and I definitely on board, at least with where the market is for the total for this one. But Tennessee laying road numbers in SEC play has not been a common theme here lately. Is this a good spot for them against South Carolina, or do you feel like, maybe Tennessee will have some trouble winning and covering as a road favorite here?
Yeah, not anxious to get too heavily involved in this one. I think you guys are obviously right. Market agreed. The under should have been the play there. A lot of SEC totals, with the exception of one, LSU, Mississippi State, I thought were priced too high in the marketplace to start it off. Under would have been the play early in the week. I definitely don't want to lay the hook on the road with the Tennessee team, like you mentioned, hasn't been laying road favorite in 3-4 years in SEC play. And they had just a few weeks ago, man, 40 players out for a scrimmage. I mean, it's not like boom bang, you're back in the next couple of days. I mean, if it was true, 40 players being out because of COVID, technically you should have missed 2 weeks of practice. So again, not willing to lay more than a field goal on the road here. But I'm not anxious to bet South Carolina with a new offense coordinator, new quarterback. Like you mentioned before, we started taping this, not a lot of playmakers for South Carolina. They lost a key one who's playing for the Raiders right now at wide receiver. So stay away at the current numbers for me.
I guess one game I do want to ask about real quickly here, just because it comes right before our highlight game. Game 433, 434 is Mississippi State and LSU, and we have seen some Mississippi State money on this game, but I know you're big on returning production. I know you read a lot of the Bill Connolly stuff like all of us do. LSU, they lost virtually everything from that championship team last year, but Mississippi State is dramatically changing their offense with Mike Leach going to that air raid. Look, 16.5 is a big number. Mississippi State could be an absolute dumpster fire here, and it wouldn't surprise anybody. Would you bet this game with your most hated rivals' money?
I would not the side. I did bet the total. They opened a total of 48. I'm like, this ain't Les Miles against an early Dan Mullen Mississippi State offense didn't have a quarterback pre-Dak Prescott. So I feel comfortable with that bet, but right now I'm not betting it. There's just too many unknowns. I would have loved to bet, LSU. I probably would have faded LSU against maybe 10 other SEC teams, but not Mississippi State. Stark difference, sort of say, with their contrasting styles of offense going to Mike Leach, new quarterback, KJ Costello, a transfer. Too many unknowns, but I think another in-game wagering opportunity. We'll know first couple series of the game. If LSU, talent weighs out over inexperience, or, maybe Costello's got the offense down and Mississippi State's chucking it. Again, I think another live opportunity, but pre-flop right now, hell no. Not betting even with your money, buddy.
I'm not your hated rival, am I? That's mean, man. Come on.
Sorry.
Come on. I know I beat you in all the head-to-head bets, but come on.
Yeah, it's all a competition, man.
I know.
Are you gonna know? I don't care if it's checkers, Uno, or making bets, little dinner bets, man. I want to win.
Are you a sharp Uno player?
I am very sharp, and
really?
I know people say it's all chance, but I can figure out a lot of things in my head on the fly. So yeah, I am very good at Uno.
All right, our next highlight video is going to be Uno tips from professional handicapper Brad Powers. All right, let's go ahead and do a highlight game breakdown here for game 437, 438, Kentucky and Auburn. Auburn, 7.5-point favorite. Total on the rise, up to 49.5 or even 50 out there. And I want to start with the total here first, Brad, because generally speaking, we don't see a lot of totals going up for Kentucky football games. Does that say anything to you one way or the other about how this game could play out?
I mean, it concerns me a little bit. Maybe the expectation is, Auburn offensively is maybe a little bit better than what we thought. But man, to me, the whole nation here focuses on the line of scrimmage, and to me, I don't expect Auburn to have much success in that department. So I am surprised the total is going up. Usually, I mean, most often, total goes up. That's gonna more scoring. Who's it gonna favor? Probably the favorite, because if there's more scoring, more opportunities for the favorite to exert their dominance over the opponent.
So as we look at the spread then here, 7.5, what do you think about that?
So this is, I'm glad we're talking about this one. It has nothing to do with the number for me. This is a matchup specific handicap for me. And again, it's a line of scrimmage league in the SEC. And, this might come shocking to most. I think it's one of those once in a generation, or at least when we're comparing to what Kentucky football has been for the last 20, 30, 40 years. This is a rare instance where I think Kentucky has the edge at the line of scrimmage, specifically Kentucky's offensive line, which many feels one of the top 5, 6 offensive lines. Forget in the SEC, we're talking the entire country. Taking it on an Auburn defensive line, just lost a couple of draft picks to the NFL, including the first defensive lineman taken. So I think specifically a big edge there for Kentucky. On the other side of the line of scrimmage, Auburn's got to replace 4 starters on the offensive line. I don't think that's necessarily a good look for the Tigers there. So even though my numbers aren't strong on Kentucky, for that reason and that reason alone at the line of scrimmage, I do like them plus the 7.5.
It's interesting. I got this one Auburn minus 9.5. I'm not sure. I don't think you're as off as I am on that game, although 2 points, most people would say it's not that far off. It all kind of depends on which numbers are in play there. But specifically on the Kentucky side, they don't have Lynn Bowden Jr. anymore. They're going to go back to a more traditional type of offense where it's not going to be a lot of improvisation, a lot of quarterback running, things of that sort. Does that worry you about Kentucky? Even though they have this good offensive line, the traditional offense and the quarterbacks that they had in-house, before Bowden took over, it wasn't really a great look for them.
It wasn't, but yet, the quarterback, and this is where I think another mispricing is Terry Wilson, who was going to be the starting quarterback last year, was the starting quarterback in 2018 when Kentucky managed 10 wins. So, he was good enough to win 10 games in the SEC 2 years ago. And look, some of the advantages, that Bowden had, it's not there. But kudos for Stoops for adjusting on the fly. But I'm not concerned that Kentucky's going back to more of a typical style offense here. And I don't think, as far as pure quarterback play, it's that big of a downgrade like everyone's making it out to be.
One last thing I want to ask you about here, as the SEC begins play, and we know that the Big Ten will begin play here in about a month or so, we've talked a lot about home field advantage, what it's worth, what it's not. You've got a crowd presence in some places, no crowd in others. For the most part, SEC teams are going to have a crowd presence and likely somewhere between 15 to 25,000 fans, depending on the capacity of the stadium. So what does that mean for you in the context of games this week, like at Ole Miss, at LSU, at Auburn, those games where we're actually going to have, enough people to really make some noise?
Yeah, but it's still significantly less than typical SEC games. So, as far as SEC, what were going to be some of the biggest downgrades as far as home field advantage, it was going to be these SEC atmospheres, specifically sold out crowds at night while you had 12 hours of drinking and consumption of alcoholic beverages, and taking that out of the mix. I was looking to downgrade some of these home field advantages 2-3 points. We'll see how loud 15, 25,000 people can be. And again, got to see it first on my screen, because we haven't seen a lot of those type of atmospheres and crowds so far in college football. I got to see it first. I'm still not expecting it for this game. Why? 11 a.m. start time. And I'll have to do the research on this, at least to make it more current. But going back to my North Coast Phil Steele days, I didn't want to be laying points in SEC conference play on these 11 a.m. Central local kickoff times. It's just, a little bit of a sleepy crowd there early in the morning. And I wasn't anxious to bet the favorite there. Let's just put it that way.
Well, and in general, for me, home field advantage, I've given 1 for the travel, 1.5 for schools that have some sort of crowd presence, but generally, it's relatively small. I think most of my SEC teams, I'd have to go back and double check this, but I think most of my SEC teams are 2, with the top of the heap being, 2.5 teams that just win at home, and they're going to win at home no matter what. And you kind of have to incorporate that into the line. But I mean, for the most part, I would say it's, pretty much cut in half for me right now for the SEC. And we'll see, if that winds up being the case going forward.
I'm in a similar, almost exactly same boat as far as my pure power ratings factoring the home field advantage.
Well, this was a highlight video here of Kentucky versus Auburn. Make sure you listen to our full podcast editions of ATS.io radio and subscribe to our ATS YouTube page as well. Brad, with that, any other games in college football that you want to talk about here for week 4 before we move over to the NFL?
The one that I think is really interesting handicap, and I know a lot of the pure math guys, the Bill Connollys of the world, really love TCU this week. I don't love TCU this week. I love the other side, Iowa State, for a lot of reasons. Number one, let's just talk. I know that there's a little bit of luster off the shine of Matt Campbell, at least his last 6-7 games dating back to last year. But one thing that he's, proven to be is he's got Gary Patterson's number to the tune of 4-0 against the spread against Patterson, covering by double digits. Laid a similar number last year and absolutely hammered TCU by 25. Iowa State's got the game under their belt advantage. It was a game, it wasn't a good look for them by any stretch of the imagination, but it wasn't as bad as the 31-14 final. 2 special teams touchdowns for UL Lafayette really contributed to that. 1 long pass play. Again, I think I'm getting value there. And I think TCU, again, COVID issues, a lot during fall camp. There was some player unrest early on back in the summer. They got a quarterback, Duggan, who's cleared to play but isn't going to start. So we'll see how that plays out. Another in-game live opportunity. Maybe he comes in off the bench, sort of say. But I'm looking to bet Iowa State here minus the 2.5. Game under belt advantage. Misleading final from the week before. Series advantage. And Gary Patterson. I mean, this was incredible in the offseason work that I did, Adam. Gary Patterson, the last 4 years, 37% against the spread. 37%. The only 2 Power 5 teams worse, UCLA and Arizona in that time period. So he's a Hall of Famer, but maybe the game's passed him by a little bit.
Wow, that's a fascinating stat, especially because, people kind of revere Gary Patterson as a head coach in a lot of ways. And maybe that goes back to when TCU was in the Mountain West and all that, but ooh, man, that's
2014, 15. I mean, had some elite teams in college football.
Yeah, that's true. The line movement on this game has been fascinating. I know Iowa State opened a favorite at Circa, got bet to a dog. I know you caught a piece of them as an underdog. Yeah. Then the line swung. They got as high as -5 earlier in the week, and now it's come back down again. Fascinating game, obviously, with all these swings. One of the most bet games of the week, and you got sharp money going both ways in this game too. So really interesting to watch the market movement for that one, to say the least.
Yeah, and I mean the market. Look, I agreed with the early money. I bet Iowa State early. 5 was pricey, no question about it. But the fact that it moved down 2.5 points through a key number of 3, so it's basically like probably a 3-point move. I mean, I'm okay with that if Duggan was going to play and start the game, but he's not. And we don't even know how healthy he's been. Has he been practicing? So I think when he's healthy and he's going to play, he's worth 3 points. In this situation, I don't think he's worth 3 points for that move. So, again, that's where my disagreement is at the current number.
Before we transition over to the NFL, do you want to spend 20 minutes on UTEP and UL Monroe or no?
No, it is kind of funny that even with everyone out, these are the 2. I think everyone has these 2 as the bottom 2 teams playing right now, as far as the pure power rating goes.
And the spread is 10. And the number is 10.
Bad,
How
man.
bad is UTEP?
I mean, they're bad. I mean, they really had to fight, claw, and scratch to beat a couple of FCS teams. And kudos, you got the wins. But we're talking middle of the road at best. FCS teams, they had to fight, claw, and scratch to beat. I would take 10, though, with UTEP, just a lean. I can't lay double digits with UL Monroe right now.
Should they just join the Big Sky or something? I mean, is that what UTEP should do?
No, they're in Conference USA, so I mean they got to stick with that money. The other team in that area of the country that's really left out to dry is New Mexico State. Doesn't have a conference. The travel, it's unbelievable travel even in a conference like the Big Sky for them. more like quit football, I think is the answer for a lot of those schools.
All right, so we will move over to the NFL here, and before we get to any games, and we will have a highlight video breakdown here for the Raiders and the Patriots. This week's injury report is stupid. And look, the thing of it is, a lot of these guys are out for the year, or at least definitely out this week and out multiple weeks. So it's not like we're sitting here waiting on a ton of questionable designations. There are a few, and there are some teams with cluster injuries where a lot of guys are questionable. But man, I don't remember an NFL season like this with so many superstar game changer types of dudes, guys that aren't quarterbacks that could still move the number being out. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I'm going to give props to Warren Sharp, talking about it a couple weeks ago. Worried about a lot of these issues with no preseason camp, not a lot of hitting, hardly any OTAs and whatnot. I mean, the first type of 100% let's go get after it's been these couple of games. So I would hate to say, hey, it's shocking, but considering what, the lack of, conditioning, lack of hitting, lack of preparation, it's not a super surprise, big time surprise for me. And yeah, I won't even get to it. I was going to get a little political, a little controversial. I won't go there.
Well, the only thing I would say is, ACLs happen all the time, and we've had a ton of those. And I don't know if that's something that, preseason would have helped with or anything like that. Certainly doesn't seem like it would have helped at MetLife Stadium, where the poor 49ers have to go back and play again.
Okay, if that was the case, then the Jets would have had a bunch of them. And
they did lose 3 guys for the season on defense last week, didn't they?
All right, fair enough.
I don't.
It just seems like the 49ers are the only ones really bitching and complaining about it, and which I think is significant considering they're playing at the exact same place this week. I think psychologically it's a horrible spot for them there, but we'll see.
Well, in general, something interesting to me about that game between the 49ers and the Giants, the Giants, lose Saquon Barkley, as we know, to a torn ACL. But they were trying to force feed Barkley the football to run with a horrendous offensive line. Now, Daniel Jones is going to have to throw quite a bit more, and maybe that helps the Giants, or at least it helps them score more points. So maybe this is, a low total over you kind of want to take a look at, something like that.
I'm still not willing to bet the over on that one, but I did pull off the rubber band on the Giants. Again, over-reliance on Saquon Barkley, yeah, it's a big loss for them. But again, how many teams are relying solely on a running back? There's a reason why they're not doing it in the NFL anymore. So again, I think moving more towards Daniel Jones at this point, maybe it's not a good look for this week. I hope it is because I bet him. But I think as far as the future and the progression of him and the development of a quarterback, not having Saquon as a safety net back there might actually be good for Daniel Jones this season.
Well, and then another running back that's out, Christian McCaffrey for Carolina. I don't know who wants to lay 6.5 with the Chargers, but I also don't know how you take Carolina with the situation that they're in, including the long travel and the first-year coach and Matt Rule and all of that. That's the thing about this week in the NFL. I think just in general, you got to lay uncomfortable numbers with the Chargers. I think the Cardinals number is a little bit uncomfortable against Detroit. You've got this, short Giants number that a lot of people seem to like. A lot of people taking Houston at the short number, which is a game I do agree with, by the way. I like the Texans a little bit in that one. But all of a sudden the Bengals are down from 6.5 to 4.5 against Philadelphia. There are a lot of unsavory, very hard to make bets being made this week, I think.
Yeah, I agree this week, and I felt the case last week, and it was the most time since in any season, basically since a lot of records went back to like 1985 as far as teams winning, favorites winning, but not covering the spread. I just, a lot of dogs I wasn't anxious to bet on. That kind of came, maybe they covered, but a window there were beautiful. And I didn't do it because I got, killed on a couple teasers in week 1. But last week was a teaser's dream, and I didn't take advantage. Again, this week, I lay with the favorite. Man, I don't want to really – I'm not anxious to take it with the dogs. So a lot of throwaway games for me in the NFL. Thankfully, I did find 3-4 games where I really liked, and we're going to get the one that I can't wait here in a couple of minutes.
Well, and this is a challenge, and tomorrow I'll talk about my circa picks for week 3, 7-2-1 to start the season here. I mean, look,
7-2-1. That's good, man.
7-2-1, not bad. Well, I mean, there's somebody at 10-1 or 10-0. There's a few guys at 9-0-1 and all that. But
keep grinding, man.
But that's the thing is, this feels like one of those quintessential weeks in the NFL where I like 3 games. I can talk myself into a 4th, but you got to pick 5 games in these contests, whether you're in the Circa or the Super Contest or you're in something, with friends or some kind of pool.
Absolutely. And my 3's always been my sweet spot. So I tip the cap to you guys being able to go.
Especially because you can't play totals.
Yeah, you can't play totals. So 3's always been kind of my sweet spot, even counting totals each week. 3-4 is what I usually bet, counting totals in the NFL. I mean, and I've been good. I mean, I'm more successful in the NFL than I am for Pete's sake in college football. But man, 5 sides is incredibly tough to do. Although, come on. I mean, everyone's bitching and complaining. You do get the benefit of the doubt as far as a stale number that you can pick as far as the contest goes. Picking, live on the side is one thing, laying the 110, but a stale number in a contest kind of, I think, evens it out as far as having to take 5.
It does. Of course, last week, Philadelphia was a stale number, top pick in the Circa, and, I mean, they got beaten pretty soundly by the Rams. And, that was one that I believe was Pick'em, I want to say, in the Circa.
Yep.
It was either Pick'em or even Eagles +1 on one of those 2 contests, I believe. And, that was a stale number, people kind of grasping at that line value. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. That was an instance where it did work out.
It works out. I mean, I did a lot of stale numbers the last couple of years in the Golden Nugget. And
you did very well in the Golden Nugget.
So, don't beat yourself up if you're losing some stale numbers. In the long run, you're positive EV.
Well, and we'll see if those stale numbers come into play here this week. Again, as I mentioned, with some of those questionable injury designations for some cluster injuries. And cluster injuries, what you want to pay attention to. Barkley's priced into the number. McCaffrey's priced into the number. Garoppolo's priced into the number, stuff like that. But those cluster injuries at other positions, generally not priced into the number. And there may be some elements not priced into the number here for this game. We got a highlight video breakdown on ATS Radio of the matchup between the Raiders and the Patriots. Game 461, 462 here on the board. New England laying 6 or 6.5, total 47.5 here. And this will be a consensus opinion from us, and you will hear me talk about this game with my Circa breakdown tomorrow on the show. Brad, the floor is yours, man. Raiders and Patriots, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so, I mean, this is probably not only my favorite NFL bet of the week, probably my favorite NFL bet of the last couple of weeks, just put it that way. This is my favorite bet that I'm going to make college or pro this week. And I know it's going to sound square, but I'm laying it with the Patriots. Number one, I think it's a horrific spot for the Raiders. Off that emotional first game win in the new stadium last week, 1 day less of prep time, flying across the country for the second time in 3 weeks for the Raiders. Huge negative that I don't think is being accounted for in this line, is sort of say. And then the Patriots, for me, the mispricing comes down to this. I think New England upgraded a quarterback this year with Cam Newton, at least now that he's healthy. Maybe that won't be the case at the end of the season, but right now with Cam Newton running and throwing, I think they upgraded. And look, you talk about, 1 yard having an impact on a point spread. This point spread, in my opinion, is 7 if the Patriots get 1 extra yard last week against the Seahawks. If they win, get the outright upset win over the Seahawks, or 2-0, I think this line's 7. So to me, a yard's not going to, move my number a half point to a point, even though I thought the market would have. So again, those couple of key factors, and on top of it, the key factor for me, 17-year sample size of New England off a loss, a straight up loss under Belichick, 68% against the spread, covering by 6 points per game. Added up for me, my favorite bet of the week, New England.
Yep, I completely agree. I cannot even play devil's advocate with anything that you said. And furthermore here, too, the Vegas offensive line has some issues. They've got some injury problems. I think last week, quite frankly, and I was on the Raiders, and that was the one that tipped me to 3-2 last week, I just don't know if the Saints are all that good. I mean, I give Vegas credit for winning the game. I give them credit for winning that week 1 game on the road at Carolina in kind of a weirdish type of spot. I just don't think the Saints are very good. I think Drew Brees is showing his age quite significantly, and he did the same thing in the playoffs last year. I think Vegas has just gotten fortunate in the first 2 weeks to play a first-year NFL head coach in Matt Rule, and then to wind up taking on a Saints team that is just watered down right now, a Saints team that just doesn't look like the team that we've seen the last several years. The Patriots, on the other hand, look very good. Cam Newton seems very comfortable. Josh McDaniels loves running this offense. They can do a lot of things that they couldn't do with Tom Brady. Belichick is a defensive genius. We all knew that already. We saw that last year when he took over as the DC. We're seeing it here again this year, even with some of the guys that, aren't out there for him. Look, yeah, Russ moved the football. Russ is going to move the football on everybody.
Yeah.
But New England will get better as this season goes along, and I think this is a spot for them to show it. So, New England, they win this game comfortably, I think. I really do believe that.
Yeah, and look, they struggled defensively last week, but Russell Wilson's getting the ball down the field vertically. Does Derek Carr and the Raiders do that?
No.
Absolutely not. Dink and dunk. I mean, that's going to fit right into what Belichick wants to do. And, you've seen the picture making waves. I love seeing Belichick look so disgruntled, like he hadn't slept in 3 days yesterday in the press conference. To me, that solidified it. I mean, maybe I'm getting, led to slaughter here, but as I'm even talking to you, I mean, I think New England's going to be my biggest bet of the year so far.
Yeah, they have to be. I mean, again, you talk about the spot, you talk about the matchup, you talk about the injury considerations, you talk about New England off a loss. Just so many things pointing in the Patriots' favor, and I'm shocked that this number is not 7. And quite frankly, by the time I edit the video and post it this afternoon, it could very well be 7. That's even cheap. I think this is a spot where New England is just primed to roll. And as you mentioned, 2 trips to the East Coast for Vegas already. And in between a Monday night game to open up their stadium. And yeah, fans weren't there, but still, that's a landmark moment for the franchise. And to do it beating a team like the New Orleans Saints, who's a fixture in that primetime type of spot, just an awful spot for the Raiders. So I think a lot of people also coming into the season, they talked about the continuity of the Raiders and how they should get off to a decent start, but a lot of people don't really love the personnel for this team. And now they're probably operating at a disadvantage here against New England. So many factors. We may end up looking like idiots here, and that's fine if we do. Because even if the Raiders win this game outright, if I got to run it back, I'd bet New England again.
Yeah.
Minus 6, 6.5, without a doubt.
I'm not going to regret it. I just, even if they lose by 30 points, the Patriots, I have to make this bet because it's just a simple check. Fits all the handicaps for me. And I'm wondering, here's where I'm off a loss. I got to lay it here. I mean, to me, again, Cam Newton right now is an upgrade over what we've seen from Tom Brady the last couple of years. So, yep. I mean, big mispricing in my instance. And one other thing, I mean, the first trip to the East Coast for the Raiders wasn't that impressive to me. Yeah, they won, they covered. But, I mean, if Carolina hands it off to McCaffrey instead of a fullback, Carolina win that game outright? I mean, that to me, that wasn't a good look. And I wasn't stunned that they beat the Saints. I mean, if there was, fans in the stands, I think Vegas last week would have been it was my top play, but it would have been a significant bet for me. I just, I thought the atmosphere wouldn't be as good, but rewatching it, I mean, the pumping crowd noise was fine.
Well, and you mentioned, 1 yard. If New England gets 1 yard and Cam Newton scores and they win outright over Seattle, this number is probably 7 minus 115, 7.5, something like that. They win that game. What's this number? 8.5? 8? Something like that. So we've got results-based, perception bias here in the market with this line being under 7. And I don't think it's right. I think it's wrong. And odds makers generally aren't all that wrong. But I think they're wrong in this spot. And both of us have a consensus opinion here on the New England Patriots. -6, -6.5. I think it's even good at 7 if you wind up reluctantly having to take that. But try to get the best number that you can here on this game for sure. And you'll get a lot of the best numbers if you listen to ATS Radio, our podcasts, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And, of course, you can get the highlight videos here on our ATS YouTube page as well. One other one here, I guess we might as well talk about this one before we sign off. I know we're running a little bit long here, but I know this is a game that you and I kind of have a little bit of a difference of opinion on. It's the Monday Nighter between Kansas City and Baltimore. No highlight video because Brian Blessing already talked about this game for us on our ATS YouTube page, but Baltimore up to 3.5 market wide, total up to 54.5 in that range. you and I have a difference of opinion here, and we talked earlier in the show about the difference between betting and handicapping. I'm handicapping, you're betting, and that's primarily our difference of opinion.
Yeah, I'm just going to take the number here. I don't think the situation's great for Kansas City and whatnot. I don't have a great, outstanding handicap, particularly for this game. But I'll take the hook here, and here's why. I think this number makes a lot of sense. If it was, typical home field advantage, or at least close to it, okay, I could certainly see Baltimore's a little bit better than Kansas City, even though they're defending champs. The Chiefs have still won 11 straight games, covered 10 of them, the exception being last week where I thought they were kind of flat and maybe weren't expecting the Chargers to have that type of quarterback play from the rookie. But, okay, Baltimore's a little bit better than Kansas City. 3.5 makes sense to me. But with the 1.5 is pretty much the consensus of what we're giving teams for home field advantage. This line is saying that Baltimore's at least 2 points better than Kansas City on a neutral. The fact that it's through the key number of 3, probably 2.5 points better than Kansas City on a neutral field, and I'm not buying it. So, I mean, they've never lost Kansas City under Mahomes. Here's a little bit of a handicap in the month of September. Hell, he's never thrown an interception in the month of September. 28 touchdowns, 0 picks. To me, I'll take Mahomes over Jackson. That's just me personally. And Reed and Harbaugh are two of the best, but right now I'd rather have Andy Reid. So, yeah, sure. Give me the 3.5.
Now, what I'm looking at here, and a lot of people are going to cite last year's game where Kansas City basically did whatever they wanted on offense, got out to a big lead. Baltimore kind of threatened with the late opportunity to cover. But last year in this game between these two teams, Baltimore had a much different back seven than they have now. They basically revamped their back seven with a lot of in-house guys that, are younger players that just kind of graduated up through the system a little bit. I think they're faster. I think they're more athletic. They are missing Tavon Young, who is their slot corner, and they won't have him for the rest of the season. Not a great week to be missing your slot corner, but they did revamp the back seven as a whole, specifically the secondary. So I think they're in better shape here to cover against Kansas City. And also, too, we have not seen a whole lot of vertical passing from Patrick Mahomes to this point. A lot of short passing, get it to guys out in space, let them go ahead and make plays. Harbaugh will make that adjustment. I don't know if the other teams that Kansas City has faced are talented enough or good. I think Baltimore can have success with that. No, because 3.5 me. But just to play devil's advocate here a little bit, you see line value with that hook. I see some things I kind of like to match up with Baltimore. And, those are the different schools of thought you can have here, not just in the NFL, but in any sport when you're betting on it.
Absolutely. And those are just two different philosophies. One thing before we sign off, I want to mention, we get that Monday night game, Kansas City, Baltimore, best Monday night game of the entire year, in my opinion. We get a great Sunday night matchup, Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers. The 4:00 window, with Seattle and Dallas is very intriguing to me. Should get a hell of a big TV number. SEC's playing on Saturday. For considering what we went through so far in 2020.
All right, so obviously an abrupt end here to the September 24th edition of ATS Radio. Lots of issues with Skype today. I did the best I could editing the audio, cobbling everything together to get a podcast version out to you. The video was messed up, and we did have some audio issues throughout the video as well. So we will not be doing any highlight videos from this edition of the show. And obviously, as you can hear here, I'm closing up the show myself. So I'll remind you that you can head on over to BradPowersSports.com. Check out that Powers Picks newsletter. He's off to a very, very good start here in both the NFL and college football, despite losing some of those bets with a lot of closing line value because of COVID postponements. So I encourage you to head on over to BradPowersSports.com. Check out what he has to offer and follow him on Twitter at BradPowers and the number 7. Coming up on our Friday edition of ATS Radio, I'll be giving you my Week 3 picks for the Circa Sports Million 2. I'll probably have 3 likely picks and a list of leans to pick from, but I will give you my thoughts, my rationale, update the progress in the contest so far, and also give you an update on the Westgate Super Contest, even though we are not in that one for this season. That'll do it for me. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. Apologies for all of the audio issues. They were not on our end. They were out of our control, but hopefully those will be something in the rearview mirror as we keep moving forward here on ATS Radio. But once again, thank you so much for listening, everybody, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.